So we'll give it a try. Let me just say very briefly, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for taking the time out late in the afternoon to come. I don't know the bios. I spent almost 40 years in the U.S. Foreign Service, ending up in Indonesia as the ambassador, and was pulled out of that to go to New York, not thinking at all that I would ever work at the UN. So it was a great surprise for me, and I've enjoyed it immensely. Let me say that basically at the UN, what we try to do on the political side, there are two of us to do it. My counterpart runs the peacekeeping operation. So if there's a sizable peacekeeping mission out in the field, we sometimes laughingly say it's like DOD in the State Department, but it's not really, of course, because we're both there doing the political work. But he does the actual peacekeeping and the heavy mechanics of that. I do the political work sort of around the world in my department and try to give him as much help as we possibly can, so we're not, so we can solve some of these really difficult problems. Let me just say that I often remark that if a issue around the world is easily solved, somebody probably solved it some time back, took credit for it, and we're happy never to say the UN had anything to do with it. We only get the ones that sort of, as one of my daughters said when she was very, very young, we get the ooey jobs, I guess. That's sort of what we get. I mean, it's the ones that we can't fix, the ones that aren't fixed easily, or the ones that drag on and on and on. Tend to come to the UN because if somebody else can take the credit for it, they will. I think that it's fair to say that the actual numbers of conflicts in the world have gone down, believe it or not. One would never know it from where we sit, but it actually has. The awful conflicts, I think, have eased by and large. We are trying our best to solve the problem before they break out again, to try to do what we can to make sure that we use preventive diplomacy, mediation, working very closely with regional groups such as the African Union or the sub-regional groups in Africa, the OSCE, lots of different people out there, excuse me, the EU, depending on what it is and where it is, we're trying to work with them. We don't spend an awfully lot of time trying to take credit for things. We try to make sure that we are giving the value added that needs to be. In some areas we have expertise that other people don't have. We have on my staff about between 5 and 7 sort of world-beating experts that we go out and get for a year, and then we can throw them at any jobs that are out there. We keep them fairly busy everywhere from water specialists who do a lot of work in Central Asia to constitutional experts or people that work on the issues and try to straighten things out. To give us a little bit of a sense of the places that we're working in, I was a couple of weeks ago, I was in Nepal and Kathmandu. We are very deeply involved in Somalia. We're deeply involved in West Africa, the various conflicts there. Guinea is taking particular attention of ours at the moment. We have offices in Iraq, and of course there's a similar office in Afghanistan. Fundamentally, I think that if you sort of look at some of the stickier issues, I should mention Cyprus. We're working very hard there in negotiating an agreement between the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots. There is no magic formula to any of these. Sometimes we have sizable missions. I mean, in Iraq and Afghanistan, they're very large missions that we are working to do a wide range of things. Other places, we may have 2 or 3 people that are out there negotiating and trying to work the issues as they come forward. I think that it's fair to say, Secretary General asked me some time back, he said, why don't we get more credit than we do for our preventive diplomacy works? I said, maybe it's partly because they sometimes only work up to that day. If they all fall apart the next day, nobody really gives you much credit for it. This is sort of our problem on the peacekeeping side too. We can stop things for a period, but to really resolve the issues, they're really political issues, and we have to find some kind of political solutions or work with other people, more likely, to find the political solutions to make them work. I think that to give one example, let me just use Guinea as an example, where obviously in West Africa we've had terrible examples in the last couple of decades of all the horrible pictures with people getting arms cuts off and terrible violence in places like Sierra Leone or Liberia. And we knew that there was going to be problems in Guinea after essentially the dictatorship for 50 years, where the second leader there when he died. We knew that there were going to be problems. There wasn't any kind of a real structure under there to manage a transition in a fair and reasonable way. Tribal conflicts, groups, the four main groups there that were in problems. So we worked very hard with the ECOWAS, the West African group, as well as the AU, to try to see if we could manage the transition there. Our person who's actually stationed in Dakar has been to Guinea, I think, maybe 45 times at this point in the last couple of years, taking the other guys with them. They go and they work these issues, trying to move it towards having the elections and such. As you know, there was a first round of elections there. Not surprisingly, when the guy who thought he was going to win came in a rather distant second, he started pushing against having the second round, didn't want to have it. They are, I think, working towards having the second round this month, and we're certainly doing everything we can. But having the next election will not solve the problem. I mean, we will still have to keep there sort of right with them each step of the way, trying to help them to make this transition. One of my very wise people I worked with said our problem in this business is we're cheating history. In a place that would normally have a transition for 2 decades, 10 decades, a couple of 3 generations, we're trying to force down into a few years and to make the kind of transition which in many other countries of the world has taken a very, very long time to do. So it is a tough game, and we will continue working at it. I mean, there are too many lives out there that depend on it. But at the same time, it's not likely to grab a lot of headlines. You know, you get headlines when troops move. You get headlines when big events happen, when you have earthquakes or that. This sort of steady grind at trying to get the right thing to come out of the other end, to try to get these transitions made, are slow and tough, and we will keep working on them. And the UN, because it is seen as the impartial organization with 192 countries in it, is in a position to do much more of this that other people might be accused of having some interest of their own. The Americans try to do it. We have to work very closely with the other, the major countries in each region, as well as the regional players. Let me just say also generally that this is only one part in the peace and security area that the UN is involved. You all know the work that's done by UNICEF or WHO or World Food Program, a tremendous amount of work out there done in the world. Also, as you have been reading and looked at UN issues, you know the UN as an organization is a very loose organization, to put it. You have under the Charter the General Assembly, the Security Council, and the Secretariat that I am, but you also have a large number of funding programs that are out there, which includes things like UNICEF, includes WHO, etc., that the structures of the way they work together are set up to be rather unclear, and so it's a huge effort to make sure that we're giving the maximum amount of bang for the buck, if you want to put it that way, by concentrating our efforts for all of the agencies to do the right things. And everybody's jealous of their independence that they get from their own boards, so it does take some work and a lot of management to make that go through. But I think we've got some relatively good success. None of when you have the big disasters like Haiti or the Pakistan floods or something, I mean, you're always going to get criticism in the press. I mean, that's just a given, and we assume it. But I do think we are making progress on those kinds of issues, and we are able to react and help a lot of people. In some places like Somalia, where 3 years ago people wouldn't even talk about helping or doing things, I think there's a good process going. The African troops there, which now we're supporting from the UN, are actually acquitting themselves quite well. We're trying to build up a Somali government and with its own security forces that can be stronger. But frankly, if we don't succeed in a place like that, you're going to have another safe haven for terrorists in the not very distant future. So we don't have any choice but to work on it and see what we can do.